Dolce, you had a good time. She's the only one left on the couch because she's a little bit of an insecure girl, but eventually she's going to be off the couch as well. Off. So you can use a pillow sometimes.
Okay.
There you go. And then you would want to pet the dog as soon as it gets off and say the word off. So we're giving it a reward. This is the roadmap to success. And we're going to talk about, I'm going to try to summarize the things we went over in this session. Let's get you up here. We want to get you on camera so people can see how cute you are. So these dogs basically had no rules and were able to tell their humans when to pet them. And you have 5 dogs. 3 of the males are the 3 males are all intact. So the intactness is going to make them protective of the humans and more territorial. They're also going to be frustrated if they can't breed. And it's going to, neutering your animal is not going to solve the problem. See how well that works if you get good timing? But it will make solving your problem much easier. So what we want to do is, come here, sweetheart. Yes, I know. First thing we went over were ways to add structure, and really discipline is maybe a better way to put it. So we talked about rules to incorporate. Some of the rules I suggested, one of them is not being allowed in the furniture for at least 30 days or as long as the problem's going on. Going under the couch then. And then at the end of 30 days, or as long as when the problem's abated, then the dog's gonna be on the furniture with an invitation and for good behavior. So if I invite Dolce up here on the furniture and she starts growling at one of her roommates, she has to get down. Or if she gets a permission to come up and then she goes down to get a drink of water, when she comes back, she would need another invitation to come back out. Okay, so you're sitting in kind of a funny way. I'm going to turn you a little bit so you're facing the camera. Because this is your, okay.
Yes.
All right, so other rules that we went over, you have to sit before I'm going to let you in or out of a door. I'm going to go to the door and say sit once. If you don't sit within a count 2 to 3 seconds, I'm going to walk away, wait 1 minute, then come back and say sit once again. If the dog doesn't sit that time, I walk away for 2 minutes. Next time for 4 minutes, then 8 minutes, and keep doubling the length of time. As soon as I go over there and I say sit and the dog sits, I open that door like there's a remote control in their butt, and they get to go out the door. Now, I would recommend, and for all these things, we have 5 dogs here. People always seem to think, well, I'll just do it with all the dogs all at once. It will not be efficient. It'll be much more efficient if you put 2 of the dogs outside or in the bedroom or whatever it is. Work with 1 dog at a time. Yes, I know. You're okay. We'll let you go this way then. And at first do it one direction, and then you want to do it in both directions. So coming or going through the door, they have to sit. And if I get to the point where all the dogs are able to be together, and I go to the door and say sit, and 2 of them sit, and the other 3 don't, then the 2 that sit get to go outside. The other 3 do not. They have to keep on. They don't have to pay for their privilege of going outside by sitting. Smallest thing we can ask them to do. Another rule would be the dogs should not be within 7 feet of each other when they're eating. They should eat one at a time. They should not be allowed to be within 7 feet of any human who is eating, because that's a way of challenging for food. And so just by adding a little bit of structure, some discipline to those things, and enforcing those rules consistently. And remember, you have 3 seconds to correct or reward your dog for them to make the connection, but it needs to be repeated enough. So each time that you're correcting your dog, don't look at it as being frustrated that the dog's not listening. Look at it as another opportunity to train your dog or teach your dog how you want them to behave. And teaching your dog how to behave is something that most people fail to do. We do it when we teach our dogs how to do a trick. We teach them how to do it. When it comes to behavior, we actually try to do it in the moment. We have guests come over, we're like, stop biting our guest. Well, that's a horrible way to learn how to be social around guests. Let me see, other rules, not being allowed to be in the kitchen when we're preparing food. The rest of the time they can come and go. Let me see, what else? So there's just some rules that we want to incorporate. Yes, she's asking for attention. And the more that we consistently enforce those, after a while, we start to shift what I call the leader-follower dynamic. The dogs start to see the humans acting like leaders in the dog's eyes, at least, because we're enforcing those rules consistently. We also went over passive training and petting with a purpose in the video above this. I'm not going to talk about this because it's all in there. But let me see. Some other things we went over were, trying to think all the little things, and I think the little things you'll have to remember. And you'll have to message me if you have questions. But we have, so basically the 2 males that fight are Bronson and who?
Ezio.
And Ezio.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the father's son. What I would do is we want them to be together. So, and that's the family's goal. But being together, they're territorial pissings. They're marking things. They're trying to have positions. They're trying to have all sorts of different stuff and competing with each other for attention. Before I get into this, actually, one little thing you do is pull out a treat and say come. Whoever comes first and sits gets the treat. Whoever comes second, third, or fourth doesn't get a damn thing. After a while, the dog has a motivation to come and behave faster because only the first dog gets rewarded. Then if I get 2 dogs that come at the same time, then I reward both of those because they're given the same effort. But if I'm petting one dog and another dog comes up and I pet both dogs, I'm just teaching the dog to be defiant. So one dog keeps on trying. Is that Ezio?
That's Vito.
That's Vito. It keeps on trying to come up here, but we're disagreeing before he gets up here. And those are that's something I can go over. Was the escalating consequences? How we disagree? What she's just doing right there. Well, she shouldn't be hissing twice. But one of the very first thing we do is always start with a hiss. I have 10 hisses. A level 1 hiss to a level 10 hiss. We more like a. Good. I thought I was going to surprise her. The more you use that, the more they'll understand that, more respect that. So the very first thing is we hiss 1 time per incident. That's why hissing back to back doesn't work. If we hiss once and the dog comes back a second time, the second thing we do is we stand up abruptly, turn to face the dog. Keep pivoting, trying to do it without you moving your feet until the dog is stationary. As soon as it's stationary, stop. Take 2 steps backwards. Left foot, right foot. Pause 1 second, then go back to doing what you're doing. The third consequence is marching directly at the dog until it turns sideways or greater. When I say march, I don't mean stop. I mean briskly. I mean moving briskly towards the dog until the dog turns sideways or greater or leaves the room. So you have to have a little bit of suddenness. Don't slow down and don't stop when you get to the dog. If the dog's still there, you walk into the dog. The dog needs to learn to get out of the human's way. That's something we talked about off camera that I'd like the guardians to do. If the dog is standing in your way, walk through it. The dog needs to learn when a human's coming, my job is to defer and get out of the human's way, no matter who the human are. That's a subtle way for the dog to identify as being more of a follower as opposed to thinking that they're a leader. So the third consequence, we're going to stand up abruptly, we're going to march directly at the dog until it turns sideways or greater, unless it's in a designated no dog zone. Let's say that we're eating on these couches here. Well, if we're eating, the dog should not be within 7 feet of any human who's eating. So there's going to be a box in front of these 2 couches. So the dog invades the couch, and we'll go ahead and allow that for now. Okay. We got 1 dog behind the camera he's taking advantage of now, and he's going up here. This should never be allowed for dogs that don't listen because that I have more authority than the humans. There we go. Guardian's doing it. Now every time we ask the dog to get down, when it gets off, we would go over and we would pet it and say, off. Remember, try to pet under the chin whenever possible. But if we ask the dog to get off and we don't reward it, then it looks at it as a total demotion. But if we tell it to get off and then we reward it and we say the word off afterwards, we create a vocabulary and we reward the dog a little bit for doing something we want. We give it a motivation to listen. And then the fourth escalating consequence, so if the dog is in a designated no dog zone and it turns sideways, we would ignore that. Keep walking into the dog until it crosses the line of wherever the invisible boundary is. The point that you stop enforcing is how the dog learns where that boundary is. Now, the dog will immediately, if I enforce it here, is going to try to go over here. So you have to beat the dog to the punch that way. And if I go back to side more than twice, then I move forward and to the side. So the more you challenge me, the further away you're going to get away from your target because I'm moving forward and to the side at the same time. The fourth consequence is to put the dog in a leash timeout. Put the dog on a leash, step on the leash, in this dog's case about 2 feet away from where it attaches to their head. Don't tell it to do anything. Wait. Now if it throws a temper tantrum, don't say anything, just wait. As soon as it sits down, it'll sit as far away as the leash will allow. Take your foot that's on the leash and slide it towards the dog to take the tension off of the leash. Do not tell it to sit. Let it do it on its own. Eventually, the dog will lay down. When the dog lays down and is calm, I take my foot off the leash very subtly. I don't pet it. Don't tell it good job, and don't take it off the leash. If you do those 3 things, the dog thinks we're done. So what we're doing is if the dog then goes back to doing what we didn't like, we can step on the leash it runs by and reapply the consequence. Or if a couple minutes go by and the dog is doing well and behaving, then we detach the leash. It's not quid pro quo. We're saying when you're going to be defiant, you're going to lose all freedom. As soon as you return to a calm and balanced state of mind, freedom is restored. Now, at that point, the dog's going to be on the leash, dragging the leash away. That's okay as long as it's supervised, but a dog should never be on a leash unsupervised because it could get caught up on something and try to jump and hang itself. But speaking of the leash, because we have 2 dogs that don't get along, I'd like them to practice being together. One of the things we could do is have them in the room, and the guardians did this for a little bit, but one of the dogs jumped out of their arms. So what I would suggest we do is we incorporate a tether. I would take a leash like this, and if I can get this out, there we go, I'm sitting on it. So if I take the leash, and if this is the leg of a chair, I run it around the leash, and then I take the leash and run it through the loop of the handle. Then I would attach the end of the dog. So that dog has 4 feet, 5 feet, however long the leash is. So what I would do is have one attached to the leg of the couch where the guardian is sitting, where he's filming me right now. The other one I'd have underneath the TV stand over there. So it's a heavy TV stand. Both dogs they're free, they can move around the room and they can be in the room together, but they can't actually contact with another. So we don't have to worry about any fighting. Now, we need to look out for certain things that would be precursors to fighting. Staring. We don't like the staring. So we want to disagree with the dogs if they're staring. If you do get a lot of that, let me know. I can share a video with you about a focus exercise. You can actually go through my website, click on dog training tips, and there's a whole bunch of write-ups for other clients. Look for one where it talks about the focus exercise. You can watch that technique. We're out of time, so I didn't have a chance to go through it, and frankly, the dogs, I don't know if they're ready for that. But eventually, if we give the dog a focus exercise, it's a great way to redirect. If I'm staring at the other dog and my guardian says focus, I turn to look over here expecting to get a treat coming. So it's a great way to redirect your dog's attention away from another. Also, licking of the lips is a sign of stress. So if we see one of the dogs is licking its lips, then look around, is one of the other dogs staring at that dog? That could be a sign that is trying, and that's just it's a communication. So staring is not something we would like to see. They can stare directly. They can also stare like this. I'm looking at the camera, but I'm just looking away. Other signs to look for are freezing in place, breathing really fast, or or holding their breath, or breathing really slow. Yawning is something called a calming signal. That's a way of saying, I'm stressed out, or you need to calm down. Also, this could be a way of saying you can approach me. It could also be a way of saying I'm pointing at that, or it could be I say please. I want to get up on the couch or something. So just like us, we could say something in multiple ways and it would have completely different meanings. Dogs have similar situations going on. If we see the staring or whatever, or if the dogs are fighting, we want to separate them. If there is a dog fight, we want to separate them, obviously. Let them settle down. But as soon as we possibly can, after they're settled down, we want to take those two dogs out for a walk together. Now, I'd like the guardians to actually start walking Vito and
Bronson and Ezio.
Bronson together. Now, when we're walking together, it's important that they're walking next to the humans. For dogs, whoever's in front is the leader. So if we let one dog get in front, the other dog's going to try to get in front, and now they're going to compete with each other. So instead, what we're going to do is we're going to put on a short leash. We're going to have one dog on one side, one dog on the other, one person walking, or if we need to, 2 people walking. Now, if the dogs they're freaking out at each other, increase the distance apart between them until eventually they stop barking. You might have to walk on opposite sides of the street. But eventually you're going to kind of start making that come closer and closer, and eventually get side to side again. That's the goal. And I'd like the guardians to be walking those 2 dogs together at least once a day, every day. But if you do it multiple times a day, that will accelerate your process. It doesn't have to be a marathon walk. These are not young, super energetic dogs, but I think extra exercise will help. But we want them to essentially practice being together. Be in the room together, tethered, gives them practice being together. Walking together gives them exposure in an outside environment. Outdoors is a lot more open. Inside makes everything more constricted and heightens everything, makes it more intense. So taking them for a walk, there are also a lot of distractions. And the dogs enjoy walking, and dogs get over things by literally moving forward. So there's a lot of benefits to walking the dogs together. Now, when we get to the point where we actually want to start introducing Bronson back to the other dogs, it should only be after these dogs have been neutered. Now, we have 3 male dogs that are neutered, and neutering is not cheap. So what I recommend that we start with Bronson, who is the most aggressive dog, but he's probably the best well-behaved dog outside of the aggression. So it takes about 6 weeks, most people don't realize, after you neuter your dog before all the hormones and sperm are out of the dog. And so a dog can actually impregnate another dog 5 weeks after it's been neutered. So it's going to take a little bit of time. We want to make sure that it's been at least 6 weeks after all the dogs have been neutered before we try to bring them together. So it's going to give us some time to practice walking them together. And they can be in the room together before they're neutered, as long as they're tethered and it's safe. But once we're going to start doing it off leash, we want to make sure it stays safe. Now, if Bronson has a muzzle that he should get should be called a basket muzzle. It's probably going to be a size 1. Now, that puts him at a disadvantage. So we have to be careful because he could get attacked by his son or by one of the other dogs, and he's defenseless. Now, as long as we're supervising, making sure everything's okay, that's fine. But we don't want to put him at a risk, and we also don't want the other dogs to be at risk from him getting bit. So if that's the case, sometimes you have to muzzle both males. But I think that if you guys take the time to start walking them together and practice them being together and then enforcing these rules consistently, they're going to start feeling better. And we also make sure you continue to do it in a balanced way. So don't have just Bronson out there all the time. We want to have him with every dog that he can be around at certain times. So we're going to do a lot of rotating. With the dogs that he can't get along with, we'll keep those separated. But for dogs to be separated from the group is the worst punishment. So if it's exclusively Bronson out there, he's going to go resentful. But we wanted the dogs to spend time together. We went over a dog bed and how to use a dog bed and how to get the dogs to go to the dog bed on command. And if the guardian's going to pan the camera and show the dogs, we at least have 3 of them sitting on the dog bed together. Now, the more of the time that the dogs spend together in a calm, balanced state of mind, the easier it is for them to reference that in the future. So that's what we'd like to achieve. Now, if Bronson is over there and the other dog's over here, make sure there's a dog bed or a pillow or a blanket or something that they can get to so they're not on the hardwood floors. We want them to be calm and quiet and comfortable. But the more time they spend together in a calm, balanced frame of mind, we're helping them practice being together. Now, when you get to using the muzzle and you want to start doing that, let me know if you need to use the muzzle. Now, if sometimes you take off the neuter him, and then we enforce the rules and boundaries and petting with a purpose and all the rest of the stuff, and all of a sudden the problem just goes away. If that's great, that'd be wonderful. But if we're at all unsure if that's going to be the case, we'd like to use a muzzle just to make sure. And if we have to worry about both dogs, again, put both dogs in the muzzle. Now, if you do get to the muzzle, let me know. I have a technique to use to make the dog like the muzzle. A lot of people put the muzzle on and then put it in a dangerous situation, and the dog learns to associate. The muzzle comes on means I'm about to have to battle. So that can create resentment. We want the dog to like the muzzle and think that good things happen with the muzzle. Let me see. Am I forgetting anything? Feeding. The humans need to eat first, and then we're going to feed the dogs one at a time afterwards. And the dogs are only going to eat out of their own bowl. And I would probably feed what's his name? Etienne? Ezio should be the first to eat, because out of the dogs that are together, he's probably the best behaved. And if the second dog that I normally would feed second is protesting, well, then he gets demoted and the next dog gets to eat. So this way we're going to reward desired behaviors, and that's a lot what petting with a purpose and passive training are. All right. Now, when you have guests come over, if your guests move suddenly, that's when you're going to trigger a response. Even though we're buddies, if I were to get up right now, she would try to nip me. She's so practiced at doing that. So one of the things we'd like to do is have guests come over to help practice. And we would like to have about a month of enforcing these new rules and boundaries and leader-follower dynamic, but then we need to help them practice those behaviors. Now, again, if we have dogs, some of the dogs are doing what we call redirected aggression. They want to bite me, but they can't get to me, so they're biting each other. So if that's the case, we might have to help them practice meeting people one at a time without the bad influence of the other dogs. Just like us, if I want to go ask a girl out, it's easy. I don't say it's easy, but it's easier for me to ask a girl out if she's by herself. If she's with 6 of her friends and I have to go ask her out in front of her 6 friends, that's really intimidating. Not for me, because I'm smooth, but no, it would be intimidating. And so for the dogs, if they have to meet with all the dogs there, they're worried, am I looking cool in front of my other dogs? And there's all sorts of other posturing that goes on. So we have the dogs away, and we just have one dog out at a time, and that dog learns to have a positive association with people. After a while, then we get another dog, and then we do them all separately, then we bring the best 2 dogs together. Then we bring 3 dogs together, and 4 dogs together, but we have to teach them how we want them to behave first. Now, one of the things I did when I came in is I showed her respect for her personal space. Now, she was barking and running away. For dogs, the more they move around, the more aroused or worked up they can get. So I used eventually a tether, and I put this around my foot, and I did a flooding technique, and then I offered some treats on the ground. Now, she didn't want to take them. I waited for her to take them first. I went about 2 hours before I before I even touched her. Thank you. But a lot of us like to think I'm going to show the dog I'm a good person by petting them. That, if the dog does not want you to be there, that's the last thing they want you to do. So just being around a dog and not trying to pet it, not trying to look at it, not trying to give it eye contact, but making it be near you and nothing bad happening helps the dog. We can kind of help it get over that hump. But then I started feeding her treats. And now we became buddies. Now she's giving me little kisses. And so the guests that we have come over should be guests that will listen to you. Ideally have a nice, calm, medium energy, but the listening to you is more important than anything else. And when they get up, they should make sure that they cough and do something to get the dogs to look at them first, and then when they get up, they should move very fluidly like they're underwater. Now, ideally, it'd be nice if they have some treats and all the rest of that stuff, so we can just spend some time with them static, meaning seated, and just giving her a treat when she comes over, and then let her walk away, and then come back and get a treat once she's untethered. But at first, she's going to be tethered, and if she doesn't sit down or she's not comfortable with the person, she might just have to sit there and just wait for her to lay down. And if the person has to leave, then we just take her off the leash, and then the person leaves. So even if the person doesn't interact or give her any treats or anything, or she won't take them, that's okay. That's good practice. The next time he comes by, she might be more willing to do that. Now, if we have family members that come by, make sure that the family members show up this video if you want, but let the family members know, look, we put a lot of time and effort into getting our dogs to behave. We're getting good progress. I know that you'd like to pet them for no reason or let them on the couch and all that, but that's going to confuse them. And frankly, we're worried that one of the dogs is going to hurt the other dogs, and it will be disrespectful if your guests, if your relatives come over and don't follow your rules. They wouldn't do that if you asked them to watch your child and they say, well, she doesn't need her insulin shot. And that's not your place to say. So hopefully we'll get our relatives. We don't have a ton visiting, but we'd like the dogs to be amicable. And if we just pet them willy-nilly, petting a dog that is not going to make it like you if it doesn't respect you. And it has to respect us first. Are you respecting me now? She's like, I want to look at you, not at the camera. So we'd like to practice that. But again, practicing one at a time will really help. Now, the other thing is these dogs aren't super well trained. Teaching dogs new tricks and commands can actually boost their self-esteem as well. Most of the time, the most insecure dogs, or the most reactive dogs, are insecure dogs. So if we can actually teach these dogs how to sit, that's they already know how to sit, but how to do other tricks and commands, now we give them other things to do where they feel good about themselves. When we get a new job, we have a sense of pride. We pass a test, we have a sense of pride and accomplishment. Dogs have the same thing going on. So in the video above, I talked, I think, at the end about tossing the treats out of the room to give the dog a directional command, or ask him to get off the couch and then petting them, saying the word off. But the more we do those sort of things, the more the dogs feel good about themselves. But if we don't have any college or any education and people do everything for us, we don't have a very good self-esteem or self-confidence or self-worth. These dogs need to boost their self-esteem, and teaching them a new trick or command each week can really help. So what I would suggest is go to YouTube and don't do a hard one. Find an easy dog trick. I would not do shake or anything that causes the dog to jump up. But maybe teaching the dog to balance a treat on its nose, or to belly army crawl, or whatever these things are, walk backwards. But if we could teach these dogs, what I would do is teach each dog separately. So maybe Sunday, you're going to pick a trick. And then you're going to teach all the dogs separately how to do it. And then all week long, we're going to emphasize that trick. Next week, the guardian's filming is going to teach the dog something. And then he shows her how to do it. And all week long, we practice that one. We teach the dog separately, and then we practice it. And if we do that, if each guardian does that for 4 weeks, that's 8 new commands that the dogs have. That's going to help their self-esteem and confidence. That, in concert with petting with a purpose, passive training, enforcing the rules, changing the leader-follower dynamic, all those things are going to help these dogs see the humans as being leaders and take the stress and burden of responsibility off their shoulders. Because I really think each one of these dogs thinks its job is to be the personal security guard for the house. But all the other dogs think the same thing, and that's why they're fighting and bickering with each other. That and hormones and everything else. So I think if we get the dogs neutered, we increase the exercise and do all the rest of the things I just got to talking about, we should get a better dynamic. Now, most of my clients only need to see me once. This might be a session where we might need to do a follow-up session. Nothing would make me happier if we don't. So we're going to have to wait and see. It's going to be probably a couple months before all the dogs are neutered and we have a good evaluation. But nothing would make me happier than to get a text from these guardians saying, showing me a picture of all 5 dogs on their dog bed together. Mm-hmm. All right. Well, I'm not going to go through all the names because I will get them all wrong anyways. But these are this is the Yorkie house, and this is the roadmap to success. Remember, everything that you do trains your dog. Only sometimes you mean it.